And the moment it gets to the pit entrance, it will peel off, and then we will go racing here at the FUJI International Circuit. We've got a lovely helicopter view here of the Porsche that's leading the field of Toyota GR86s around, with Johan Fourie and Willem Botha that's on the front row. I think they're heading towards the end of the lap, if I'm not mistaken. Difficult to judge, but it's a lovely track out here. We're going to have a look-see now as that car makes its way around that final corner, exactly where, well, if it is the final corner, and I think it is the final corner. If that's the case, it'll peel off. Yes, there is the pit entrance. That is the final corner. Already Eugene Manouk lost the track coming out that final corner. And we will be going racing soon. So it is Johan Fourie from Willem Botha that's on the front row of the grid. Then we have got, as the car peels off, Luc Lecchesi, and Peter Hubert sits there on his outside. That's the second row. And you'll notice when the action happens, they're still keeping it very calm. There we go. Fourie puts the hammer down and off he goes. Tucking in there behind him is Willem Botha coming straight down the center. He's Graham Stephen. He has got Rackstraw right there with him. Followed there by Francois Hubert as this whole group carry race into turn number 1.
Yep, Johan Fourie going to lead them in. Oh, there's just not enough space for everybody to come through there. Johan Fourie from Willem Botha as they lead them out. The next man through is Peter Hubert. Oh, and there's chaos further down in the field. We've lost out on a good couple of drivers there. But let's go back to the front end of the field. Johan Fourie leading them out. Oh, he gets it completely sideways. What a recovery. He gets that back in that second position. Oh, and a lovely piece of driving there by Johan Fourie.
And there's chaos further down as well, because Peter Hubert is in trouble. Luc Lecchesi is in trouble going into that right-hander. So a lot of the top dogs are in deep, deep trouble right now. There is the man that sits out in P1. That is Willem Botha. Graham Stephen in that second position. Gerald Fourie sits there in third. Then it's Johan Fourie. Raymond Duggan is right in there with Andrew Rackstraw. That sits there right on his case. Then coming behind Rackstraw is Peter Hubert, and right there with him is Willem Botha. There's Willem Botha, different color scheme, normally with a Castrol car. There is Sander Bakari in the 72 as they work their way around, and there's drama. More chaos, more drama just before they go into that right-hander.
That was Jarno van der Westhuizen that went off at that stage of the fight. So Willem Botha leading them out very, very neatly in that second position. Long time since we've seen him right up front. That's Graham Stephen following through on Graham Stephen, the number 10 car of Gerald Fourie, getting quicker and quicker towards the end of 22 and 2023. Whenever we've seen him, he's been very good. Gerald Fourie from Johan Fourie. Behind Johan Fourie is Andy Rackstraw. Behind Rackstraw is Peter Hubert. That's the black and white. Down the front main they go.
Right, then we've got Raymond Duggan in there, and Luke is pretty high up as well. He's Pina. Pina sits there just behind Duggan. There goes Hubert. There is Van der Merwe, and having a look, is that Sander Bakari? Yes, it is Sander Bakari that looks up on the inside of Pina as they work their way into turn number 1. Overdoes it, and will Pina come back at him, tries, but does not get his nose ahead there of Sander Bakari.
Going back to the front end of the field, Willem Botha is just doing a brilliant job here, breaking away from the rest. Graham Stephen, Johan Fourie all over his back bumper. Behind that is Gerald Fourie. Gerald Fourie looking very, very good right now. Robbie Teams has just been involved in an accident.
So we'll have a look and see. Is this a replay of Robbie Teams, or are we live, Gary? There's the replay. Remember that we won't be able to see it on the screen, so Gary will have to give us some wave gestures here. Yeah, that's him getting it all wrong there. Robbie Teams, the bald man in car number 7. So we're back to live action again. Rackstraw was going one-on-one with the man just behind him, Gerald Fourie, as they work their way through. You see the two of them absolutely side by side as they come through. There's Rackstraw, there's Fourie. Right with him is Peter Hubert, and right on the case of Peter Hubert is Raymond Duggan.
Well, let's go back to the front end of the field. Graham Stevens closing up. Graham Stevens closed up on the back end of Willem Botha. At the same time, Raymond Duggan finds himself at the back of that rather high-speed train. Raymond Duggan from Peter Hubert, from Gerald Ferry. Nothing much in those two. Luke Lucchese's on his way back up the field. That's Luke Lucchese, and he's trying to have a look around the outside of Peter. He goes across to the inside line now of Peter Hubert, Peter van der Space, should I say. Rudolf Tolman's been involved in an incident as well. Let's have a quick look at that. That's what happened to Rudolf Tolman.
Yeah, I saw that on live. He just came out that right-hander and then going on to the main straight, just did a swapper where the tail end decides to swap itself around.
This was Stephen McCarthy. Let's see what happened to Stephen.
Contact between himself and Tristan de Nobrega.
Yeah, I think the other car, I think you're right there. That was Tristan de Nobrega. Yeah, Tristan went in pretty late. Tried to get it in nice and deep. Oh, they weren't actually even close to one another at that point. That's netcode, folks. That shouldn't have happened. That's one of those things that does happen. Let's go back to the front end of the field. We are 4 minutes 39 into this race. Willem Botha is driving into race number 2. That's Willem Botha. Here's the... Oh, Johan Ferry. Johan Ferry's got past Graham Stephen. Graham Stephen ahead of Andy Rackstraw. Rackstraw's got a bit of a gap between himself and Peter Hubert. Then it's Raymond Duggan that comes through there. Gerald Ferry once again having a pretty good run. Willem Pina is now dropping off the back of that front pack of 7. In there behind Willem Pina is Sandra Bakari. Look at that battle, Frankie, Luke King and Francois Hubert.
Yeah, Luke King and Francois Hubert, and just behind them you see Luke Lucchese coming into shot as well. So Lucchese sits in P11. He's just outside of that top 10 as they work their way around the Fuji International Circuit, and he has still got Captain Peter van der Spey in there behind him. Not too much gap between the two of them. There goes Fourie. Right behind him is Rackstraw. Right on his case is Graham Stephen. Down the main straight they go, followed there by Peter Hubert. Hubert is right on his case. Raymond Duggan is right there. That's what it looks like from Graham Stephen, sticking his nose right under that bootlet, so to speak, there of Andy Rackstraw.
That's how close they are to one another. I'm sure he's going to try and have a look to go up on the inside. Yes, he does. Can he make it under brakes? Andy Rackstraw, Graham Stephen, Graham Stephen, Graham Stephen, Andy Rackstraw, Graham Stephen. No, it's going to be Andy Rackstraw, but who's coming to play in there behind them? Peter Hubert.
They must be careful for Peter Hubert. Oh, there was slight contact there between Graham Stephen and Peter Hubert as Graham Stephen moved to his left, and only then realized but that Peter Hubert is right on his case. Raymond Duggan is also on the case of Peter Hubert. The man has got the Iron Brew sponsorship on the side of that Toyota, and that's that first group of 6 motor cars. They're getting away here from Willem Pina, Sandro Bakari and Francois Hubert. Francois Hubert just behind them, and look who's closing on them. Look who's closing on them. It is Luke that is closing on them. Luke Lucchese, that sits there in that 10th position. He's now made his way up into the top 10, and he's right on the case there as Francois Hubert has a look up on the inside of Sandro Bakari. But Sandro Bakari holds that line going into that right-hander, and he loses the tail end. And who's going to capitalize on this one? Will Lucchese go through? No, he doesn't. Luke stays in there behind Francois Hubert.
Well, he had a look in, but it didn't work for him. So from the top end down, but if we don't have the battle box and everything, but we'll have to just make do without that for now with the updates that have happened. So it's Willem Botha. There comes Johan Ferry. He cannot get away from Andy Rackstraw, having had a good qualifying and practice and racer for Graham Stephen with Peter Hubert right in there behind him as they work their way up the front range. Behind that is the Iron Brew car. That is Raymond Duggan. A little bit further back, the Green Mean Machine of Francois Hubert. In close attendance behind that is Luke Lucchese, who's just got past Peter van der Spey, and there in fact is Peter van der Spey. So just behind that is the recovering Luke King. Remember, he had a bit of an incident earlier on. JJ van der Merwe, and then behind that is Gerald Ferry, and behind Gerald Ferry will be Sandro Bakari. behind Sandra Bakari, and having a look, Stephen McCarthy up on the inside of Tristan de Nobrega, but Tristan has got that one all well sorted out and looking pretty good at this stage of the fight. Francois Joubert is on the move. Francois Joubert on Willem Pinaar.
Well, as we looked at that one, we saw Sandra Bakari go very wide, and I think he might have just been overtaken there before we had changed the camera shot. But yes, definitely Luke Lucchese is right in it. There he goes wide, and one or two cars might even have nailed him on that one. He did lose at least one position to de Nobrega. So we go right back here. That and is Willem Pinaar.
Yeah, he had a bit of an off.
So Pinaar sits there just ahead of Francois Joubert, and that is the off of Willem Pinaar.
So let's have a look at what battles there is up front. Probably the closest one is this one. Raymond Duggan on the defensive at this stage of the fight. He's got Peter Joubert directly in there behind him. The next closest battle after that's probably going to be Stephen McCarthy with his good old friend there, Sandro Bakari. But we are now 9 minutes 21 into this race. Let's have a look from the front end down. Oh, in a class of his own is a Willem Botha. That battle between Johan Fourie and Andy Rackstraw stays together. Graham Stephen just ahead of that Raymond Duggan and Peter Joubert battle. Going a little bit further back, Luke Lucchese not getting away from Francois Joubert. Francois Joubert is staying there with him. And then, Frankie, we have the next one behind that. Peter van der Spey from Lou King and Gerald Fourie.
Right, then behind Gerald Fourie, we'll have JJ van der Merwe. Right on his case is a 7-0 car of de Nobrega. Then it's a Sandra Bakari. Right behind him will be Stephen McCarthy. He sits in P15. And then Willem Pinaar, that's making a comeback after having an issue early on. Not too far behind him, we'll see Eugene Manouk. Lovely colour scheme there on Manouk's car, and he's been kept company there by the Boltman, by Robbie Teens. It sits right there on his case. But further down is Rudolf Tolman, and right behind him we've got Lou Wrigley, followed there by Richard van der Heerde. But back to the sharp end of the field. As a matter of fact, we're going to go to that fight there for 4th position, P4 and 5, as Peter Joubert is crowding the back end there of and makes a move stick there on Graham Stephen, then goes right off the track, bounces off that curb, goes right off the track, and is going to lose the tail end, and he loses it right in front of Graham Stephen, and Graham had to take evasive action, and he will also lose out there to Raymond Duggan.
Yep, so that means Raymond Duggan in the Iron Brew car says thanks very much. But remember, Raymond Duggan's got a long way to go to get to the back end of Andy Rackstraw. Rackstraw is a little bit further up the road, almost 5 seconds there. You just saw them in the corner of your picture. There is the two that's in front of him. That's Andy Rackstraw and Johan Fourie. Johan Fourie in front of Andy Rackstraw. Then we've got Raymond Duggan, who came out best with that little, shall we call it, tete-a-tete, where they made contact there. There's Graham Stephen. There's the recovering Francois Joubert. And in comes Luc Lucchese.
Luc Lucchese sits right there with him. And then Peter Joubert, that had a fantastic start. He sits behind these two that you're seeing there in a picture now. There comes a 777 car of Peter Joubert. That's the nose cam of Peter Joubert. And he's looking straight down there at Luc Lucchese and at Francois Joubert as they work their way out of, I think that's turn 1 if I'm not mistaken, and make their way around. But that fight is still raging on ahead of him between Luc Lucchese and Francois Joubert. Just ahead of them, going into that left-hander, you saw Graham Stephen.
Well, that's what it looks like from behind. Let's have a look from Francois Joubert's car. Oh, a lovely colour scheme there on the Luc Lucchese car all over the back. But the tantalizing fact is that if he looks just a little bit further forward, past Luc Lucchese, should he be able to get past Luc Lucchese, is he can go and have a look at the blue and orange car. That man over there, you see just in front of them, that being Graham Stephen. Just ahead of Graham Stephen, that is the Iron Brew car. Remember, Raymond Duggan getting through very neatly when there was a bit of contact. And then that battle up front still hasn't broken up at all. Johan Fourie ahead of Andrew Rackstraw, but not very much whatsoever. And, well, the only real deal out there right now, apart from the two of them, well, he's driven into race number 2 already. Look at this. Just look at the graphics on this one. That's Willem Botha that's leading out. The next two you see coming through there, that's Johan Fourie and Andrew Rackstraw. Then the Iron Brew car of Raymond Duggan just behind that. There comes Raymond Duggan. Behind Raymond Duggan is Graham Stephen. Behind Graham Stephen, a very good recovery. Back up already into that 6th position. That is Luc Lucchesi. Francois Joubert sort of holding on to the back of Luc Lucchesi, but starting to lose a little bit of ground now. Then the next man through behind that is Peter Joubert. Luke King, that we haven't spoken much about, he is in 9th position with Peter van der Spey rounding out the top 10.
Right behind him is Gerald Fourie. That's right on his case there, and Tristan de Nobrega is right there. He's rubbing that back bumper, so to speak, of Fourie, of Gerald. He moves to the very inside of the circuit, does Tristan de Nobrega, and unsettles Gerald Fourie, takes that tighter line, and he makes the move stick there on Gerald Fourie, and now sits in there right behind Peter van der Spey. A little bit further down the road is the 6th car of Luke King. That's him going into that left-hander. As we see them work their way through, there is de Nobrega. He's just ahead there of Fourie and sits there just behind Van der Spey.
Well, where we've got Gerald Fourie just behind them. JJ van der Merwe not that far away from them either. That's JJ van der Merwe, and if he looks at that battle in front of him, well, it looks like he's at a stone chip on the front window, and that's right in his line of sight. That'll be very irritating for him to have that right in front of his line of vision.
Right, so we ride aboard here with JJ van der Merwe. Always got that lime green colors, even in the Mercedes-Benz when they do GT3. Oh, they are all over the place.
And here he comes.
That he's going to have a look up. He's going to have a look at Van der Spey. Van der Spey got completely unsettled there and lost a place or two, and now he sits there just ahead of Van der Merwe, and JJ will pressurize Peter van der Spey's Toyota GR86. Van der Spey under immense pressure. It's going to fight for 2nd and 3rd position. It's still Johan Fourie from Andy Rackstraw. That's there in that 2nd place, racing down under the Yokohama Bridge towards turn number 1. You saw Rackstraw moved out and had a look and decided not quite yet. Well, this is the old versus the new. This is the old SA champion of back in the day. Johan Fourie is still a damn good racing driver, and he's been kept honest by a man that still takes part in Extreme Festival for Race Driver SA, and that is Andrew Rackstraw. Coming towards us now is Duggan. That's an Iron Brew car. Right on his case there, you see Graham Stephen. Right behind him is Luc Lucchesi, and behind Luc Lucchesi is the 304 of Francois Joubert.
Oh, Peter Joubert not that far behind them, just about in the same camera shot. There's Peter Joubert looking surprisingly, still finding himself in that 9th position. He hasn't been able to go any further forward. He's got a bit of a gap now between himself and, shall we say, the balance of the mid-pack, being Tristan de Nobrega, Gerald Fourie, and Peter van der Spey. So all things being equal, we are 16 minutes 27 into this first race.
Right, so here we go. That is de Nobrega. Behind de Nobrega is Gerald Fourie. Behind Gerald Fourie is Peter van der Spey. Behind him is JJ van der Merwe. The other green car that you see there, that is Willem Pina. He's been hassled here by Sandro Bakari. And right on Bakari's case is the 15 car of Steve McCarthy.
Yep, Stephen McCarthy's got a bird's eye view. Ooh, he's also got a chip on his front windscreen. Uses a lot of the curbstone.
2 chips actually.
Yeah, and Sandro Bakari is taking a very defensive line. He knows that Steve is on his way, and Steve actually does brilliantly. He picks the sausage curve rather than the back bumper of Sandro Bakari. This is a very tight left-hander. You've got to carry as much speed through there as possible. Getting it very sideways was Sandro Bakari. Up the hill you go towards the last corner. Now you've got to feather it and drop it through the gears and get as much drive as you can without getting onto the sausage curves on the outside. We're right aboard with Stephen McCarthy behind Sandro Bakari. The other battle that's getting a little bit tighter up front is in fact the battle between those two, which is Willem Botha and Johan Fourie.
Johan Fourie and Andy Rackstraw, because Botha sits way down the road.
Correct.
So that is that fight for 2nd and 3rd. We've forgotten about Willem Botha, the man of Toyota Gazoo Racing. It's been a long time since he's actually won a race, but he's still got, we've done 18 minutes. The fastest man out there is Francois Joubert. He's got a purple lap time there. It's a 53.05. So he is the fastest man out there, and he finds himself in that 6th position. And he is chasing down the likes of Graham Stephen and Raymond Duggan. That is the 3 of them that you see there, with Peter Hubert not too far behind that group of 3 cars. Peter in the 777 cars. We ride here on board with Francois Hubert, looking down at Duggan, and just ahead of Duggan is Graham Stephen as they work their way up that tight left-hander. There's Mount Fuji, you see at the back there. That's still an active volcano there in Japan. You just see it behind that building as we work our way out the final corner. Down the home straight they go, racing towards turn number 1. As you see them there, Graham Stephen, Raymond Duggan and Francois Hubert.
What about that story? You can't weave more than once in a straight line to break the toe. Somebody forgot. Yeah, somebody forgot to tell.
Nobody told them that.
Yeah, no, Graham Stevens never heard of that. Not at all. Remember this guy, as they call him Willem Botha. He's busy with the 2nd race already. He's got himself one hell of a gap between himself and Johan Ferry. That's now starting to break away a little bit there from Andy Rackstraw. And it looks like there was just a change-up of positions here. And
something happened.
Yeah, Francois Hubert.
Something happened.
Francois Hubert passed Raymond Duggan. So yes. Raymond Duggan. Oh, hold on a second. Let's go and have a proper look at this. This is what actually happened. Have a replay
at this and have a look, see what happened. Because he's the car on the very right-hand side of your screen. Duggan's up on the inside, and Duggan loses it and makes contact there with Graham Stephen. And as the cars roll apart, Francois says, "Thank you very much." And he goes to the middle and he makes up a couple of positions there.
Interesting stuff. All right, so the gap between Johan Ferry and Andy Rackstraw is in fact now starting to open up just a little bit. There's about 0.9 between them. The likes of Peter Hubert onto the back of Graham Stephen, that is looking at about 0.65. Peter van der Spey on a JJ van der Merwe. That one's still very tight. That one hasn't been decided yet. Rudolf Tolman's just been involved in an accident. Let's see if we can have a look at that one. Let's see what happened to Rudolf Tolman. What a lovely paint job on that motor car.
Sits there just behind Eugene Manouk and loses the tail end just in front of Eugene. And Eugene had nowhere to go and gave him a bit of a tap to say, well, just get out of my way so I can get through here. There is McCarthy. Now McCarthy's made the move stick here on Sandro Bakari, because he was behind Sandro Bakari a couple of laps ago. And Steve McCarthy has made the move stick there on Sandro Bakari.
That is the replay. Yeah, and that's exactly how he made it happen. He made it look very easy, in fact, under those conditions. And Richard van Heerden has unfortunately had an off. He's been at the back end of the field. And this one hasn't worked out nicely for Richard whatsoever. I think these GR86s, they don't want to brake and turn at the same time. If you climb on the brakes, you don't turn that much. The moment you turn on the steering wheel, you know that it's going to be very, very tight. Peter Hubert and Francois Hubert, nothing much between them. There's Graham Stephen that's directly in there behind him.
Yeah, we just saw before that, we saw McCarthy come back at Bakari there, or should I say the other way around, Bakari coming back at him. But now we're having a look at this fight, and it is Van der Merwe and Peter van der Spey. They're having their own little fight there for that 11th position as they work their way through the right-hander. 22 minutes is done, so we're heading towards the closing stages of this race.
Willem Botha in the 23 car, hard on the brakes, kicks onto the curbstone, gets the tail end coming around. Luckily for him, gets completely out of the way of the oncoming traffic. Everybody says that's fantastic. Johan Ferry goes through, Andy Rackstraw goes through, so that costs Willem Botha very heavily, because Willem Botha was doing a brilliant job, and the new leader is now with 22 minutes and 45 seconds. That's already been done, is in fact Johan Ferry from Andy Rackstraw. Then the recovering Willem Botha that had been 5.6 seconds ahead of everybody else coming through in that third position. There comes Francois Joubert. He's got a fair gap between himself and Pieter Joubert. Graham Stevens winning the top 7 all night long. Luke Lukizi on his recovery run, still in 7th, but closing on Graham Stevens from Luke King. And then a bit of a gap back to the original train driver, Tristan de Norriger from Gerald Ferry. And then outside of the top 10, that group being led out by JJ van der Merwe.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Willem Botha will be absolutely miffed at himself, because that was an easy win that he just chucked away and lost that position to Ferry and Rackstraw. So this is a replay of Graham Stephen, and going through and right up against Pieter Joubert, and that cost him big time, and mowing into the side of him there was Luke Lucchesi.
Yep, that was a bit of a turn up for the book. So turn number 1 is becoming quite an issue for a good couple of the guys. Let's go back to Luke King on the back of Pieter Joubert. They are running in 5th and 6th positions. Luke King behind Pieter Joubert. The rest of the guys starting to get a little bit spread out. Talking about not spread out, this is not that spread out. That's Andy Rackstraw all over the back of Johan Ferry. 24 minutes, 23 seconds gone.
So coming out the final corner, this will then be their final lap that they're going to start. They will not see the checkered flag now. They'll get to the checkered flag before the 25 minutes is up. So then this, if my facts are right, they will then be starting their last lap now. The two of them make it.
It's actually checkered flag has come out. There's the checkered flag on the left-hand side. So the computer says enough is enough. And then it is Willem Botha, the next one that comes across the line. And let's follow the rest of the guys through. There is Francois Joubert. As he comes up across the line, there you'll see the checkered flag on the left-hand side. The next man behind that's Pieter Joubert, from Luke King, from Luke Lucchesi, from Graham Stephen, from Tristan de Norriger. The next one through there will be Gerald Ferry. Behind Gerald Ferry's JJ van der Merwe. He'll be the next one coming up towards the line.
Well, the checkered flag came out 40 seconds too soon, so they should actually have done another lap. But here comes van der Merwe across the line. Behind him is Peter van der Spey. Behind him is Willem Pina. Behind Willem Pina is Sean, listen to me, Steve McCarthy. And then Robbie Teams will get to the line ahead there of Low Wrigley.
We must actually get Sean and Steve both back on circuit again.
Yeah, here comes Duggan towards the line. He also lost out big time by having issues. And then Rudolf Tolman will finish behind him, followed there by Eugene Manuk. And then behind Manuk, that's the Budweiser car of Sandro Bakari. Also looked pretty decent towards the closing stages, and then it also fell apart for him. Richard van Heerde will be the last man to see the checkered flag with the retirement of Janu van der Westhuizen.
Yeah, Janu that has not done a lot of racing recently at all, moving up the west coast, and then also deciding to get married as well. So that's taken him completely out of the racing for an extended period of time. And at this level that these guys are racing at, Frankie, there's no easy way to pick up points, not at all. So for those of you that have joined us late, we are at a Fuji International Raceway. You just saw the backdrop there of what is still classed as an active volcano, one of very few worldwide. I wonder how many active volcanoes there are worldwide. It can't be a hell of a lot.
No, there are. There's a lot. There are lots. But either way, folks, that was race number 1. And it was won by Johan Ferry from Andrew Rackstraw second. And Willem Botha finished in third. That's the podium for race number 1. And I think the drivers, Gaza, they might have a 5-minute or so run. Those that want to do a 5-minute run before we get into the second 25-minute race of the day.
Interesting, out of all of the guys that can go out on circuit, which is everybody that was out there earlier on, the only one that's actually gone out there is in fact Peter van der Spey, hence the car that you see on screen. So he's obviously trying to just refine his laps just a little bit. Not too sure about how many cars are being inverted on the grid. I don't know if you can remember.
I think it's the top 10, if my facts are right.
Wow.
I think it'll be the top 10. So if you end at 10th, then you will start in pole position, which means that Johan Fourie will then have to start in P10. Rackstraw will then start in P9, and Botha will start in P8, and so forth. So if you ended in 10th position, you will be in pole position. It's
Actually,
going to be interesting.
You speak about Botha that starts ahead of those two, and he managed to actually pull away from those two in the first race, apart from one mistake.
Yeah.
So if he starts in front of those two, can Rackstraw and Fourie actually then go and catch him? They couldn't do it in heat number one. He could be the actual danger man out there in all real terms, for the guys that are on the invert first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. That could be, in fact, where the problem lies for them. So that was the only car that was out on circuit. And there, Frankie, there's your favorite mountain.
Yeah, that's Mount Fuji. And the last time we were on this track, I made a very interesting statement, and I don't know if people can remember. The last round of the 1976 Formula One Grand Prix season was held here in storming conditions. And Niki Lauda, that made a comeback after being badly burnt at the Nürburgring, could actually have won the World Championship. But he never finished the race. He pulled into the pits and retired. And that gave the World Championship of 1976 to a certain Mr. James Hunt. And that happened on this very circuit.
So let's have a look at, Peter van der Spey, Captain Pete's going to be on the front row of the grid alongside JJ van der Merwe.
Yeah, and there you see as they work their way down, well, it shows here that Johan Fourie will start in 12th position. So then they're therefore not inverting the top 10, they're inverting the top 12 then.
So that puts Peter van der Spey and JJ van der Merwe on the front row of the grid. Then it's Gerald Fourie and Tristan de Nobrega, as you can see. Then Luc Lucchesi, third row, alongside Graham Stephen. That's the orange and the blue. And then directly behind that is Luke King and Piri Hubert. The row behind that is Willem Botha and Francois Hubert. The row behind that is the frequent flyers. That's Johan Fourie and Andy Rackstraw. And then, the next man behind that, the man that just missed out on the split, in fact, was then Stephen McCarthy. Because he finds himself just behind that trio of Willem Pina, Johan Fourie, Andrew Rackstraw, and Willem Botha. So the pressure is going to be on for Peter van der Spey. You know, Captain Pete, he loves to be competitive, and he will do whatever he can to try and stay at the front end of the field. There they are, and that is JJ van der Merwe with a green car, and alongside him in the multicolored, that is Peter van der Spey. And on the second row of the grid, Gerald Fourie and the original train driver. That's the white one nearest to you. That is Tristan de Nobrega, the white and blue on the far side. That one is Gerald Fourie. And the row behind that, the blue and the orange, that is Graham Stephen and Luc Lucchesi on the outside of that.
Watch out for Luc Lucchesi. We were all talking about Johan Fourie and Rackstraw and Botha. He is starting way ahead of them, and he was right in the mix with them before we had an issue. He is right there, Luc Lucchesi, with Graham Stephen, and if he can have a good opening lap, he could actually be the man to catch and beat today, which means it will be very difficult for Johan Fourie, for Willem Botha, and for Andrew Rackstraw and the rest.
Well, if you're a mirror on the side of the pulsator Peter van der Spey, that is what you're going to see behind you, and that, to my mind, looks kind of scary.
Yeah, he's got Gerald Fourie, you see just in there behind him. On his outside is Van der Merwe. Don't write off Tristan de Nobrega neither. If it goes right for him, he could easily win this one. Remember, we've got the under 40s and the over 40s. I like to call them masters and grandmasters. They also refer to them as elites and masters. So we're going to be underway pretty soon. As off we go. That's what it sounds like as the green flag. Oh, Eugene Banouk hammers the wall already and then ricochets off the track to the right-hand side, his right-hand side, as Van der Spey leads him down into turn number 1. De Nobrega, here comes Graham Stephen. Graham Stephen right through. Oh, there's contact. There's multiple cars, 4 cars involved in that pile-up, heading into turn number 1.
Oh, great loss there. Graham Stephen from Gerald Ferry from Andrew Rackstraw. And Luke I think your prediction, Luke Lucchese, Andrew Rackstraw, and then Johan Ferry. And I think that is going to play out exactly like you said.
Yeah, Francois Hubert sits there just behind Luke Lucchese. Then Robbie Teings, my word. This chaos played into the hands of Robbie Teings, and just behind Robbie Teings is Johan Fourie. Van Heerder comes through. There comes Sandro Bakari. Right behind him is Roelof Tolman. As we go back to the sharp end of the field, that's his first 4 cars. Watch out there for Lucchese. Lucchese on the grass, wanted to make a move there on Rackstraw. Rackstraw's moving all over the place to keep Lucchese behind.
He's tucked brakes.
He's tucked in there just behind Gerald Fourie, and they're chasing down race leader Graham Stephen.
Graham Stephen, I can't remember when last Graham Stephen actually led out a race, so this is going to be a lot of pressure for Graham Stephen from Gerald Fourie. Well, if you're going to have a quickie behind you, I suppose, oh, that's going to be the end of that one. That's Andrew Rackstraw. That has gone, and unfortunately, they just took 2 completely different lines, swapped ends, and that was the end of that. Luke Lucchese is up into that second. He brings with him Gerald Fourie, a very level-headed Gerald Fourie that finds himself now behind Luke Lucchese. Francois Hubert is right in there as well. Can he get the drive and the late braking up on the inside of Gerald Fourie?
Yeah, but Fourie was involved. Gerald was involved in that incident earlier on as they head down into turn number 1. He's got Johan Fourie right there with him. And we're going to have a look at the replay of this, and you'll see there as he brakes, Fourie turns in, and then he goes out wide. And I don't know if this is a replay or not, because I think he's still live. So folks, forgive us if we make the odd mistake here or there. We haven't got all the data to work with, but this is the fight as we are live for the lead between Graham Stephen and Luke Lucchese. That sits there in that second position. Gerald Fourie is there in that 3rd place as they work their way into that left-hander. I did say early on, Lucchese can get his nose up front. He's going to be a very hard man to catch, pass and overtake, but right now he's making life very uncomfortable for Graham Stephen.
Well, if he gets it right all the way around the outside, it's going to be one hell of a move, and it looks like he's going to do it. I think Graham Stephen actually lifted off there. I think he thought, I can't hold Luke Lucchese out. Let's not slow myself down and allow Gerald Fourie to come close. Remember, Gerald Fourie, Francois Hubert, that's 2 old hands. They don't make mistakes very easy. You allow yourself to tangle up with the likes of Luke Lucchese. These 2 are going to come and fetch you very quickly, and look who else has come to play.
Yeah, Johan Fourie's joined the part. He's eventually got his nose ahead there of Robbie Teings, and that's what he needed. He needed to clear that 7 car very quickly and get back into the fight. There is Van der Merwe. Behind Van der Merwe is Lou Wrigley, having a slightly better second heat than what he had in the opening heat. There is Wrigley. Where is Willem Botha? Willem Botha did not actually get a good start off the line. Remember, he was there with Rackstraw and with Fourie. Rackstraw was in trouble. He's got sent packing early on. He finds himself in 12th position, does Andy Rackstraw.
Pity Hubert that backed out of that one. He says, I don't want a piece of this whatsoever. I'm going to stay away from that. And closing up onto the back end there of a Lou Wrigley, coming a hell of a lot closer. Talking about very close, Gerald Fourie is starting to make his move.
Yeah, but look who's right on his back bumper there. It is Johan Fourie that sits there. So Fourie chasing Francois Hubert. That is in that 3rd position, chasing Graham Stephen, who is chasing the race leader, Luke Lucchese.
Willem Botha now on the move there on the Lou Wrigley, and they swap places. they've actually helped him in a bit of a straight line there. So Low Wrigley and Willem Botha going one-on-one and making a bit of contact, and Roelof Tolman has just moved up a position as well, and then he drops back. Luke King gets past him again, so trying to make that maneuver but not been able to make it stick.
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 cars that went through before we jumped to Tolman, that sits there in behind Van Heerde. These cars are jumping all over the place. Oh, and Willem Pienaar's in trouble. Willem Pienaar's in trouble. You just saw that car snake all over the place. Willem Pienaar, if we can pick up a replay on that, you'll see that that car started walking all over the place there of Willem Pienaar. That would be the 57 car. However, we have a look at this fight. There is the Nobrega, and there you see the 57 car slightly in trouble as he rejoins there a couple of positions back.
So going back then to Gerald Fourie and Francois Joubert, nothing much between them. Sorry, Johan Fourie and Gerald Fourie, the two of them now going side by side. It's Gerald Fourie on the outside, it is Johan Fourie on that inside. Johan late on the brakes. Can he make that one turn in enough that Gerald doesn't get a run on him? Well, he goes slightly outside of track limits, but not a train smash. So let's go from the front end of the field. It is Luc Lekesi that leads out. Then it is Graham Stephen. Then that man, Francois Joubert, not being dropped whatsoever in this race. Then Johan Fourie, who's having a massive battle there with Gerald Fourie. Now both of them have got past that man, Robbie Teagues, but Robbie Teagues has got them rack-backed and stacked behind him. It's JJ van der Merwe, that's the green one. Willem Botha, that was well on his way to win race number 1, has not made a lot of headway so far in this race. Then look at the battle coming up behind that, led out by the recovering Andy Rackstraw.
Yeah, Andy Rackstraw coming through, and he's got Low Wrigley there that's also trying to fight his way back. And behind Wrigley is Sandro Bakari, and then Luke King will sit there in that 6th car behind Sandro Bakari. Luke all the way down in a 12th position. That's at fighter 4, and they are all fighting for Rackstraw's 9th position. Coming through on us now, that is Tolman. He sits in 13th position, is Roelof Tolman. And then bouncing all over the place there is Peter van der Spey. And then behind Peter van der Spey is Duggan, and behind Duggan is a man that's also trying to recover, namely Willem Pienaar.
Raymond Duggan surprisingly far back as we go back to Graham Stephen. That's under a lot of pressure now from Francois Joubert.
Yeah, that's the top 5 that you see racing down the home straight into turn number 1, being led there by Luc Lekesi. Francois Joubert once up on the inside of Graham Stephen. Now turn 1 is a right-hander. It's a very, very sharp hairpin like. Oh, look at Fourie. Johan Fourie wants to try and get past Francois Joubert.
He's going to do
that
it.
That would be genius if you could make that move stick. He might just make it stick, and Johan Fourie has done it. He has done it, but coming right back at him into that left-hander is Francois Joubert. Joubert might just take that position back, and he does so, going into the left-hander, and Graham Stevens says, no, don't forget about me, and Gerald Fourie says, but hey guys, don't forget about me neither. What's happening here is these 4 guys are fighting for 2nd position, and this is allowing Lekesi to escape down the road.
This is probably going to be the best view we're going to see of it, and that is going to be from the car of Gerald Fourie. Bang into the side of Graham Stephen. That takes a lot of his momentum away, and Graham Stephen unfortunately is not going to be very happy with himself for making that error. He climbs on the brakes, and it just, he was just not enough on the brakes. Ended up going into Joubert, and with the force on the front of the car, the whole thing turned around, and that was the end of that. So now the gap between Johan Fourie and Luc Lekesi has grown just a little. The gap between Francois Joubert and Johan Fourie has closed up just a little. After that one, Gerald Fourie finds himself a little bit in no man's land, and then the Willem Botha, the recovering Willem Botha, he's in there, and the Boltman, Robbie Teagues, still inside the top 6.
Yeah, he sits there in the top 6, and right behind him is Andy Rackstraw, and behind Rackstraw, as we see the cars go through, is Sandro Bakari. Behind Sandro Bakari is Luke King and Graham Stephen. There is Bakari, there's King, there's Stephen coming into view behind
Frankie,
them.
that's dropped him down to 11th position. That's a hell of a knock for Graham Stephen.
JJ van der Merwe coming through as well. And then we see two cars side by side there. That is Duggan and Tolman. They are side by side, and then weaving around as well. Behind them is Peter van der Spey. Decides up against pit wall is a lot better for Captain Peter van der Spey. And then Peter Hubert is in that fight, and he was at one stage next to Willem Pina.
Well, riding on board there with Rudolf Tolman, and he actually backed a little bit out of that one to make sure that they didn't make any contact at all, which is it's all good. Sander Bakari on the back of Andy Rackstraw. Who's going to be the quicker of the two of them? Well, there doesn't seem to be much between the two of them at all. There was only 0.15 of a second, 15 hundredths of a second. Oh, how's that for good drive? Having a look up on the inside line, and I think he might make that one stick.
Yeah, that's Luke King. That's going to make the move there, and he makes it stick on Sander Bakari. Rackstraw's a bit further down the road from the two of them. That is King and Bakari. A bit of connectivity issues here for the man in car number 6, namely King. Behind them, you just saw Graham Stephen come into view. But there's Andy Rackstraw, and he's right on the case of Robbie Teens as they work their way into that left-hander. Surely Andrew Rackstraw of Race Driver SA should be able to make the move on the Teen Bolt man. That is Robbie Teens, as they work their way out of the final corner and down the home straight.
Well, look at this one. The Luc Lequesi, Johan Ferrier, Luc Lequesi friend Johan Ferrier and Francois Hubert. Francois Hubert having the up on the inside of Johan Ferrier, who's going to be the better under brakes and carry it through. I see Andy Rackstraw at the back having a look to get through there as well. Andrew Rackstraw on Robbie Teens, and I think Andrew Rackstraw has made that one stick. Let's have a look there for Andy Rackstraw, Robbie Teens.
Yeah, got him.
Yep. It looked like he was quite early coming out into the straight on that move already, and it looked good. Oh, Francois Hubert, Johan Ferrier, they are duking it out, and this is opening up the way for Luc Lequesi to get away at the front of the pack. And Luc Lequesi has already got 3.4 seconds on the two of them, so as long as they hold one another up, it's going to be a whole lot easier at that point for him to get away. Peter van der Spey has just been involved in an incident. Let's see if we can pick that one up. Oh, our favorite turn number 1. It just doesn't want to work for the guys here, and just a little bit too much.
Peter Hubert was involved as well, the 777 car.
So that was actually, let's see what happened exactly there for Peter Hubert. Let's have a look at it from Peter Hubert's point of view.
So going up on the inside.
Yeah, he just lost the tail end.
Yeah, Van der Spey went up on the inside of Tolman, and then of course Hubert lost the tail end, and that's where the contact came from, or should I say that resulted in the contact.
So you just saw shooting across the bottom end of your screen, that was Luc Lequesi. This is Francois Hubert from Johan Ferrier as they work their way out into the front main. First, the second and third, as you can see them. Oh, look at this battle. Gerald Ferrier, Willem Botha, recovering Willem Botha, and then remember behind that is Andy Rackstraw. Behind Andy Rackstraw is Robbie Teens. That's once again the Boltman having a good run. Luke King better than the last race that we saw him in, coming in along very strong. And once again we see Sander Bakari in the top 10. Graham Stephen rounding out the top 10. He won't be too happy after that incident that he had. Here's another nice battle. That's Low Wrigley and JJ van der Merwe.
Yeah, Van der Merwe pulled to the left-hand side of Wrigley there. That's not going to help him much unless he can get the run on him and make the move stick before turn 1, which he's not going to do. He won't get that right. He's right next to him, so Low will have that inside line for the sharp right-hander. That is turn 1. And here we see coming through now, that is Peter Hubert making a move up on the inside of the Nobriger with Tolman right there as well. That is the 3 of them. And then behind them is Willem Pina.
So they were very close as they crossed lines there on board with Rudolf Tolman, looking at the back of the original train driver, Justin de Nobriger, and Peter Hubert. Nothing much between them at all, but we have to go back and have a look at the likes of Gerald Ferrier and Johan So Gerald Fourie and Willem Botha. So Willem Botha on a lovely comeback at this stage.
Yeah, trying to fight his way through. He never went with the guys that he had to go with in the beginning, but because there was a bit of issues, he caught up. Rackstraw was right there. There's the two of them. There, Rackstraw comes into view. So that fight is not over. You have a look at Peter Hubert and Tristan de Nobrega. Look at these cars bouncing over those curbs there as de Nobrega chases Peter Hubert into that right-hander with the Tolman and Pienaar not too far behind the two of them. There Tolman comes into view, but we go back and have a look at this fight between Francois Hubert and third place man Johan Fourie.
That's how close Johan Fourie is. You don't get any closer than that. He makes sure that there's a little bit of a gap between them under braking, and he decides he's rather going to follow through as opposed to doing anything weird, wonderful or fancy. So that is your second and third positions. Luc Lekesi from Francois Hubert and Johan Fourie. 15 minutes 43 into the 25-minute race. Gerald Fourie just holding on there with that recurring Willem Botha after the disappointment of not winning race number 1, and Willem Botha and Gerald Fourie holding one another up exactly the same as Johan Fourie and Francois Hubert is holding one another up, and that's making it a little bit easier for Luc Lekesi. Look at this. Oh, hold on, and he does. Brilliant stuff there, Willem Botha and Gerald Fourie.
But if they keep on rubbing each other up this way, Andrew Rackstraw is going to be right on their case.
Yes.
He's already on their case. He's got missile lock on on both of them. Sandro Bakari, I see in there just behind him. And behind Sandro Bakari is Robbie Teens. And we should see Graham Stephen in the mix as well. There is Sandro Bakari, there's Teens, and there's Graham Stephen. That's the three cars that go around, and that's going to be a pretty decent one. But Luke King just ahead of the three of them.
Would have thought that Graham Stephen might have just made up a little bit more ground than oh, he was brilliant drive there. I would have thought he would have made up a little bit more ground than this, but that just shows how quick everybody is. I mean, Graham Stephen is lying there in 10th position at this stage of the fight, and not managing to get ahead of Robbie Teams. Robbie Teams on Sandro Bakari. Once again, Sandro Bakari in the top 10. Luke King from Andy Rackstraw. And let's see who's pretty close. Well, they're pretty close. In fact, that's Johan Fourie. That's alongside. We need to do a different shot to be able to pick it up. And Johan Fourie ahead of Francois Hubert. And, well, that is two of the very experienced masters. Are we referring to them at the moment?
Well, I don't know. I refer to the under 40s as masters and the over 40s as grandmasters. I think that is titles that suits both of them. This would then be two well, I don't know about Francois, but I think this would be two grandmasters that would be fighting out there with each other. There is JJ van der Merwe with Low Wrigley right on his case. That is the two of them that's coming through. Then behind them, here is Tristan de Nobrega, and he's got the 777 of Peter Hubert right on his bumper as well.
Look at this.
Yeah, that is teams that tried to look on the outside of Bakari, but everything stays the same. And ahead of them is Graham Stephen, and ahead of Graham Stephen is Luke King.
Yep, Luke King doing a pretty decent job. There's Graham Stephen, there's Sandro Bakari with Robbie Teens right in there behind him.
Right, making our way towards the final corner. You see that building on the left-hand side, and that Bridgestone banner, or should I say, half-moon shape. You know you're heading towards the end of the lap. Not quite yet, but they're heading towards the final corner. As they work their way around, you'll see Mount Fuji there on the back of the building, which will take them onto the home straight as they race through. But now, Andy Rackstraw is crowding the bootlet there of Gerald Fourie as they race down towards turn number 1, and you wouldn't bet against Rackstraw taking that position away.
It looks, according to where he's definitely ahead already. Now, it's not an easy line to go on the inside there, brake and carry decent speed out of the corner. If anybody can, I think Andy Rackstraw can, and yep, he's made that one stick. So Andy Rackstraw, and remember, at the end of the day, Andy Rackstraw is actually looking at this man in front of him, Willem Botha, because that is fourth position, Willem Botha. Now, Willem Botha's been putting up some very quick lap times, a 153.9 on the last lap by Willem, a 153.7 by Andy Rackstraw, a 154.8 by Gerald Fourie. So let's have a look from the front end of the grid, and well, he's doing brilliantly. Luke Lucchese, while everybody is fighting behind him, and in everybody, I'm talking about Johan Fourie and Francois Joubert, while they battled one another, they lost out 4 seconds eventually to the likes of Luke Lucchese. So they had a good battle, but it's cost them big time. Willem Botha has now got a bit of space between himself and the last man that he got past. That's Andrew Rackstraw. Andy Rackstraw just ahead of Gerald Fourie. Looking, you see, coming. Oh, Graham Stephen all over the show. Graham Stephen has made it back up, in fact, into that 8th position, and that ahead of Sandro Bakar, who's still fighting it out with Robbie Teens. 20 minutes 45 into the 25 minutes. Race number 2 from Fuji International in the Toyota GR86.
Well, I want to have a look and see. There's a car in trouble. That's Graham Stephen. Graham Stephen, that's the 4 car that's in trouble. Let's see what happened to him. I think he just did a swapper going into that left-hander. Into left-hander, overdoes it a bit, and
just a little bit too much.
Trouble there for Graham Stephen.
Yeah, that's going to cost him. Graham Stephen, I just said, what was he in 7th position? He's dropped all the way down to 10th, and taking over that 7th position is in fact Luke King with Sandro Bakari. And then Robbie Teens, the next one that's in there. Still very close at the front end of the field. Francois Joubert all over the back end of Johan Fourie.
Yeah, Fourie must just defend this 2nd position now, because there's nothing that they can do about the overall race leader, Luke Lucchese. Luke is 4.5 seconds ahead of the Fourie-Joubert combination that you see there, fighting it out for 2nd and 3rd positions. There you see Luke Lucchese just disappearing into that right-hander as Joubert goes and sits on the outside, trying to hide himself there in the rearview mirror of Johan Fourie, but you're not going to get that done. Oh, look at those cars bouncing over those curbs, taking a bit of a hammering there as they make their way out of the final corner, or no, racing towards the final corner.
Well, let's see who gets the better line here. Is it going to be Francois Joubert or Johan Fourie? Nothing much in it. You can see Luke Lucchese there in the final corner as he takes the climb with the Mount Fuji there in the background, and out onto the front main they go. So it's all about that man, Luke Lucchese.
Way down the road, we've got 22 minutes and 45 seconds done. So we're heading towards the end of the 2nd and final race. There is the fight that I want to see. Willem Botha been chased down by Andrew Rackstraw, and that is the fight for Botha's 4th position, with Gerald Fourie not too far behind them.
And the white flag has in fact been brought out. There you see the white flag being waved, and how's that for closing off the inside line when you go right towards the inside of the circuit, and Rackstraw has a dive on the outside of Willem Botha.
I don't think it's going to work unless he just has a go for it. No, but Willem Botha knows that he's been... Oh, there's contact. There's contact between the two of them, and they both get sent packing.
That's a pity. That's a big pity. That's Willem Botha's 2nd time that it's gone wrong for Willem Botha in just as many races, and he loses out pretty badly with that one. Back to Francois Joubert and Johan Fourie. It's 23 minutes 44. The white flag has come out already, so Luke Lucchese already on the last lap.
Yeah, I must say that the white flags have come out pretty early in this one, and in the first race as well, but this is the fight for 2nd position. They're not going to beat Luke Lucchese. Luke will just keep it on the black tarmac and take it towards the checkered flag. But Johan Fourie still got some work to do to stay ahead there of Francois Joubert.
Luke Lucchese going through the 3rd last corner. As he works his way, he'll have a double right-hander as he goes up the hill. And that will be coming out into the front main for Luke Lucchese, and this should be for the checkered flag.
Yeah, checkered flag will be out. You saw the white flag early on, So this will then be the flag lap as he races towards the line, trying to see the man with the checkered flag. And I'm not too sure. I think the checkered flag
Yep,
did
the
come out.
checkered
Yep,
flag
there's
did
a
come
checkered
out.
flag. So it is Lucchesi P1, Juan Fourie P2, and Francois Hubert P3, followed there by Andy Rackstraw.
Yep.
What happened to Willem Botha? Willem Botha's way down, because here comes Gerald Fourie, and behind Gerald Fourie is Luke King, and only then do we see Willem Botha cross the line ahead of Robbie Teams.
Yep, behind Robbie Tings is Sandra Bakari, Tristan de Nobrega, Piri Ube, and then Graham Stephen. Behind Graham Stephen, JJ van der Merwe, and then Low Wrigley. They will come across the line. There is Willem Pienaar. There was in fact an off for Willem Botha. We'll have a look at that one just now as Raymond Duggan in the Iron Brew car. He comes and takes the checkered flag. The next man coming through there is in fact going to be Stephen McCarthy. A quiet run from Stephen McCarthy. Would love to see Sean back out on the circuit again. Richard van Heerden from Rudolf Tolman. And it looks like Peter van der Spey in the background, is it?
Yeah,
Yep,
that
here comes
Captain
Peter van der Spey. And then just one man still to come through behind that, and that is Eugene Minuk. Let's see what happened with Willem Botha. I think he did have an off circuit. It's after the that was that incident with Andy
between himself and Rackstraw.
Yeah, that was that one, and that's what made the difference there. So your end result in race number 2, Luc Lucchesi, that eventually romped away, but the reason for that, Frankie, was Francois Hubert giving Johan Fourie a hard time, Andy Rackstraw having a big battle there with Gerald Fourie, and them holding one another up, which eventually created the Willem Botha spinning out of it, and that did make it easier for Luc Lucchesi. Gerald Fourie rounding out the top 5.
Yeah, and then Luke King, followed there by Willem Botha, Robbie Ting, Sandra Bakari, Tristan de Nobrega in the 10th position, followed there by Peter Hubert and Graham Stephen. That was the top 12, and then behind them in 13th is JJ van der Merwe, Low Wrigley, followed there by Willem Pienaar in the top 15.
Yep, that's your top 15 from Raymond Duggan, Stephen McCarthy, Richard van Heerden, Rudolf Tolman, Peter van der Spey, Eugene Minuk, and who didn't finish the first race, didn't start the second race, Jarno van der Westhuizen. With the new kit that he's bought, you'll probably find he's not happy with the settings, not doing what he expects it and wants it to do, and rather than mess up somebody else's race. And that's what I like about what's happening with iRacing in South Africa, the level of respect that's starting to come through between the drivers. And amongst the senior guys, as we saw, Luke, Johan, Francois, Andrew, Gerald, Willem, Luke King, Robbie Ting, Sandra Bakari, lots of respect shown between these guys, and brilliant stuff. So, 2 races that we've had. That is round number 1 of Sports and GT, season number 9 from the second year production studio. Gary Fleming, the voice of Oval, and the voice of Bushwhackers Motorsport, Frankie Hienes. Frankie, I think you can sign off from the rather warm Velgelegen studios of second production down here in Cape Town.
Yeah, rain predicted in Cape Town for tomorrow. Lots of rain, as a matter of fact. So yeah, we're looking forward to see you back again next week, Wednesday, for, I think it's a final round of GT3.
Yep.
And that will be from the Lamar circuit. That will be next week, Wednesday.
Then the following week, we'll go to the final round of the Pro-Am Series, Porsche Cup.
Yeah, which will also be at Lamar.
Yep, and then we go to round number 2 after round number 1 tonight of season number 9 of Sports and GT, and that's going to be on a weekly basis from there on out, because then the GT3 IRSA MSA series is done, the Pro-Am Porsche IRSA MSA series is done as well, and then every single Wednesday we'll be doing round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I think we've got 10 or 12 rounds, which will bring us to the last weekend in November, and then we're going to take a break for iRacing South Africa and come back to you in the last week of January. We'll be starting with a new series. What it's going to be, I don't know. there is a possible change up in management and direction. So we wait to see who of the young guns are going to step up and come to the party and carry iRacing South Africa forward from there. A big thanks to Luke Lekizi for pulling this series together for us.
Yes, I like the new series. As I refer to it, it used to be called the iRacing Master Series, so I call it now the iRacing Master and Grandmaster Series for the drivers under 40 and the ones over 40. So, folks, that's it. We'll see you at the racetrack this weekend somewhere. Remember, support your clubs in all various forms of racing all over the country, and we'll see you soon. Good night.